This is AP Environmental Science, Chapter 1, Part 3. Last time we talked about ecosystem services, and these are free services provided by nature that we're able to take advantage of or use. And so we're dependent on nature in order to survive as a human species. And so as environmental scientists, we want to be able to measure these things, and by measuring different components of our surroundings, our environment, we can then determine whether an ecosystem is stressed. We can determine the health of our planet. And so what we use is what's called environmental indicators. Wow, that line messed up. Environmental indicators. And so an environmental indicator describes the current state of an environmental system. And so we have 5 that we talk about in this course, although there's many different types of environmental indicators. We're only going to describe 5 in this chapter, and we'll touch on other ones throughout the course. So the first and probably the most important environmental indicator is biological diversity. And so we'll be discussing this. Food production is another. How much food can humans produce? Average global surface temperatures and carbon dioxide concentrations. This is coupled, so this is just one. And so we'll talk a lot about that later in this course. Human population, what's the current rate of growth and what do we project it will do in the future. Resource depletion, and so how are we using our resources, and are we depleting them to an extent that is not sustainable. And so by measuring these things, we can determine the health of our planet, and then we can determine whether we're living sustainably. And so this is an important definition, sustainability. So this is just living on Earth in such a way that allows us to use its resources without depriving future generations of these resources. So the key here is we want to use resources. We have to use resources to survive, but we need to make sure that we're doing this without depriving future generations of these resources. So it's important to understand we have to use resources, but we want to make sure we measure our usage in order to determine whether there'll be resources for future generations. And so this is sustainability. And this is why environmental science is important, because what we want to do is measure environmental indicators and measure resources in order to determine whether we can actually live sustainably, for a long period of time. So this table is important, table 1.2. I'm not going to describe all of it. You just need to take a look at it. Again, I can test you on this table. Make sure you pay attention to each column and how they link to each indicator. So the first one we're going to talk about is biological diversity. This is perhaps the most important environmental indicator, and perhaps also one of the most shocking, or one of the most concerning, I guess that's the word I want, indicators that we see currently on the planet. So biological diversity is referring to the diversity of life forms in an environment. And so if you go to let's say you go to the desert, you see some life forms, but maybe not too many. But if you've been down to Costa Rica and you go to the rainforest, the diversity of life in front of you is quite dramatic and amazing. You can literally not even count the number of different species that are in front of you. And so biological diversity is one way we can measure the health of a particular environment. And so there's also 3 important things that we'll take a look at under this broad term biological diversity. We'll talk about genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. So the first one's genetic diversity, and this is obviously only in the last 60 years we've been talking about genetics and genetic diversity, and we're gaining tools to measure genetic variation more quickly and more accurately, and so that's a really cool thing. It's giving us more precision in our measurement as environmental scientists and biologists. And so genetic diversity is this measure of genetic variation among individuals in a population. And the key here, and this is a very important thing to remember, is high genetic diversity is very good. And so this is good for the species and then ultimately good for an ecosystem, high genetic diversity. With high genetic diversity comes a lot of benefits, but one example is disease resistance. And so if we look at this crop right here, these are all banana plants, and so all banana crops are clones of each other. So each tree that you see here, they're all clones of each other, exactly genetically the same. And so that's a problem because there's low genetic diversity. Disease can wipe out a whole population of banana plants, or any species for that matter. And so we've seen this in the past, and I think it's the 1950s Panama disease, which was a fungus, took out literally worldwide or global banana crop of one particular species of banana. And so the banana that your parents or your grandparents ate is not the same banana that you see in the markets today, and it's because of Panama disease. We're also recently seeing another fungus start to take out the banana that we have grown to love at the markets, and this is because of low genetic diversity. You can sort of spread throughout a crop quickly. Species diversity is another thing that we can measure. And a species, first of all, let's talk about species. So species is a group of organisms that is distinct from other groups in its morphology, its behavior, or biochemical properties. Another way to think of it is, can two individuals, can they breed and produce fertile offspring? That's one way to sort of indicate whether it's a species or not. There's a lot of debate about what determines a species and such, particularly with genetics coming around. And so we can measure species diversity, and species diversity is going to indicate the number of species in a region or in a particular type of habitat. And we can measure this fairly accurately. And so by measuring this, we can determine the health of a particular ecosystem. Currently, we've measured 2 million species, or we've cataloged 2 million species, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Scientists estimate that there's 5 to 100 million species on Earth. And I guess most would say that it's probably somewhere around 30 million species on Earth. But this is the range that most scientists will talk about, 5 to 100 million species on Earth. So we have a lot to discover here on Earth. And so here's just some pictures to give you an indication of how diverse life is on Earth. These are just some quick pictures. These are just insects. Now insects, we've cataloged more insects than any other group of organisms, and particularly beetles. We've cataloged unbelievable amount of beetles on Earth, and this is just only a few of them cataloged here in these photos. So here's some more insects, all different, all genetically unique, and all important for their ecosystems. Here's a room full of drawers of just insects. Remember, this is just insects, which is the largest group that we've discovered in terms of number of species, but mammals and fishes and all sorts of other types of organisms have a great number of species as well. And so, you know, this should be familiar from biology. We have all sorts of different categories of living things, and in each one of these we've discovered quite a bit. So cone-bearing plants, I think we've discovered like 760 species, but there's maybe a few more than that. Flowering plants, 200,000+ species, and there's probably quite a bit more than that. Fish, well, the ocean's mystery and quite vast. Lichens and bacteria. This bacteria is probably the most undiscovered living organism on Earth. We've discovered a lot of bacteria, but they evolve so quickly, and as well they live in all sorts of crazy places. It's hard to catalog them. And so bacteria, this is where our estimates of biological diversity increases dramatically, because we think there's more bacteria than we could ever imagine, and we'll never discover all the bacteria on Earth. Ecosystem diversity, and so in a particular region, we can measure the diversity of ecosystems in that region. And so again, sort of, I think this is a statement that you should remember. Greater number of healthy and productive ecosystems means a healthier environment overall. So remember this statement, very important. So we can measure biological diversity and all these different types of species diversity, genetic diversity, but one important indication of the health of our planet and biological diversity is extinction. And so we can measure extinction. It's difficult to measure, but we can measure these things. And so here's some important things that we should know. Evolution of a new species, or what's called speciation, which you should learn in just general biology. We estimate that 1 to 3 new species per year evolve and diverge. And so evolution is changing the number of species slowly, 1 to 3 new species per year. That's an estimate. And so you're increasing the amount of species on Earth in this way through evolution. However, there's a natural rate of extinction. Species get kicked out of their niches, and so they go extinct. So there's a background extinction rate. Background extinction rate is an average rate of how fast species go extinct over a long period of time. So we're looking at millions, spans of millions of years. We can estimate this through fossil record. And we estimate that 1 species per million species per year long ago, that was the background extinction rate. So very slowly, and again, that's an average over a long period of time. Now, we have mass extinction events that have happened. About 5 have occurred in the past, we think, in Earth's history, and we believe we're in another mass extinction that has been caused by humans this time around. And so in the last about 200 years, we've seen extinction rate just incline tremendously, unfortunately. So the current extinction rate, it's an estimate, and so it's approximately 1,000 to 10,000 species per year go extinct. Now again, endangered, this isn't your tiger, although that's endangered. Oftentimes you're talking about a lot of insects, little tiny fishes that you never think about. These types of things are going extinct, and it's not something you encounter every day, but populations are going extinct, or species are going extinct each year.